Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Mochi ball python. The Mochi actually consists of two genes, the Mojave and the Enchi. As a matter of fact, both the Mojave and the Enchi have been around for a long time. Actually, they're both in the top 10 most popular genes of all time, and that's why it's really inexpensive to actually get into the project. And if you actually have a ball python with the Mojave and the Enchi in the mix, you actually get a really impressive combo. As a matter of fact, if you actually add other genes into a Mochi, you can get some really breathtaking results as far as the visual appearance of the snake. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over the internet and I want to show you the potential of the Mochi ball python. Alright, so I want to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the two genes that make up the Mochi, and one of them is actually the Enchi. This is a really prime example of an Enchi, and essentially what Enchi does is it really reduces the pattern on the ball python and it really brings out a lot of yellow, kind of a goldish, almost like an orangish yellow in a lot of combinations. And it's kind of interesting, sometimes you can see Enchis that aren't really as reduced as this one, and then some of them are really super reduced. I say this is probably the best Enchi that I've seen over here on Morphmarket, especially, you know, with the really reduced pattern and the bright kind of a goldish orange yellow on this snake. Pretty awesome. And the other component of the Mochi is actually the Mojave, and here's a really good example of a Mojave. This one is super bright. As a matter of fact, I have lessers that are almost as bright as this, and the difference between a lesser and a Mojave is the Mojave is actually a lot darker as far as the background, a little bit brighter in some cases compared to a lesser. And you know, if you're actually looking at the blue-eyed leucistic genes like the lesser and the Mojave, they completely react different if you actually compare genes like the lesser and the Mojave. And if you actually take the Mojave, breed it to an Enchi, this is what you get. Take a look at this crazy snake. This is the Mojave Enchi, also known as the Mochi, and it's a really impressive, just as, you know, two gene combo, some of the two most common genes. As a matter of fact, if you actually have Mojave and Enchi in your collection, you may want to think about actually breeding those two snakes together to make a Mochi. So what I want to do is I want to add a few other genes to the Mochi so you can really see the ultimate potential of the Mochi, adding in other genes. And I want to start with the pastel. And the pastel is a co-dominant gene, and essentially what a pastel is, it's a bright yellow snake. Some of them are a lot yellower than others. Some of them are a little bit more browned out. And Enchi, in a lot of cases, it actually reduces the pattern of the kind of the Roswell gray alien heads on the sides of the snake. And this one's probably not as reduced as I've actually seen some of them, but it's a really super bright pastel. And here's what happens if you add pastel to a Mochi. Take a look at this snake. This is really awesome. And it seems like you can actually see the Mojave really shining through and working really well with the pastel and the Enchi to really bring out a lot of contrast and a lot of bright colors. It's pretty awesome. And this one's actually also called, you can actually name this the pastel Mochi, or you can also name it the Pastavi Enchi. The Pastavi is actually the pastel and the Mojave, kind of the combination of the end of the name over here. And if you actually look, look at the price on this one. This is kind of crazy. This one is only $150 for a 3-gene combo. You can get into this for almost nothing compared to a lot of the other genes in ball pythons. So here is the banana. The banana works really well with the Mochi. The banana is actually a co-dominant mutation, so if you actually breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as banana. And when it comes to bananas, bananas are usually really visually dominant. As a matter of fact, sometimes it'll overwhelm a lot of the other genes in the snake, and sometimes you'll actually get it to work really well. In this case, it actually does work pretty well. Take a look at the banana Mochi. Take a look at this snake. This is almost unbelievable how this almost looks like it's like almost like a coppery metallic color on this thing. This is like, I'd say this is kind of the best example that I've ever seen of a banana Enchi Mojave over here on Morphmarket. So this is a banana Enchi Mojave or a banana Mochi. And if you actually take a look at the price on this one, only $300. So we're talking about kind of, you know, as far as, you know, a lot of the morphs I'm looking at over here on you know, Morphmarket, we're looking at like $10,000 snakes. You can actually get into a lot of these projects with the Enchi and the Mojave. So here is the Leopard ball python. The Leopard is actually kind of a pseudo dark morph. You know, if you actually mix it in with dark genes, it'll actually really darken the dark parts of the snake. And if you actually mix it in with something like Coral Glow, it actually won't darken the snake. It's kind of a, you know, in between the dark and the light. But, you know, the Leopard actually is pretty much known for scrambling up the patterns on the snake. You can see in this one, it's a little bit reduced, but if you actually add Leopard into a lot of combos, it really mixes and jumbles up the patterns. And here's what happens if you mix Leopard in with a Mochi. Take a look at this. This is a really crazy snake. I really love the contrast and the color in here. You can definitely see in this case, you know, the Mojave starts out a little bit dark because it's a little bit darker than lesser, and you actually have the Leopard, which is, I think it's really where a lot of the dark color is coming from between the Leopard and the Mojave. And then the Enchi is really reducing the pattern, and the Mojave is really keeping a lot of the contrast, the really bright, clean lines in the snake. Pretty amazing combo. So here is the Pinstripe ball python. The Pinstripe is actually a dominant mutation. So you breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as Pinstripe. And kind of the interesting thing is usually with dominance, you know, a lot of people classify these in ball pythons. If it's dominant, usually there is a problem with the super. A lot of times the super form is lethal, or there's a problem where you can't make the super form. And the Pinstripe, I've actually seen a few super Pinstripes popping up over here on Morphmarket, and from what I've seen, they pretty much just look like a regular pinstripe. If you actually have the super, you breed it to something else, all the offspring would come out as pinstripe. So technically, we may be on the verge of reclassifying the pinstripe from a dominant gene to a co-dominant. If we actually, you know, prove that there is a super pinstripe that is actually viable and produces all pinstripe. I thought that was kind of interesting. Here's what happens if you mix the pinstripe in with the Mochi. Take a look at this. This is actually called the Enchi Jigsaw because now we're going down kind of the rabbit hole of the Jigsaw. The Jigsaw is actually the combination of the Pinstripe and the Mojave. So this is kind of a whole nother, as a matter of fact, I have a Jigsaw video that looks at just those two genes together and all the potential combinations you can make with the Jigsaw. That's pretty awesome. And in this case, this would be also called the Pinstripe Mochi. It's pretty awesome. It's kind of an interesting combo. Not quite as, you know, contrasty as a lot of the other ones. The Pinstripe is usually really visually dominant as well. So if you actually go over to the dark side, this is the blackhead. When it comes to dark snakes and dark combos, the blackhead is pretty much the darkest of the dark. And if you actually look at a blackhead by itself, it almost looks like a really dark normal. It's super dark in the background, and it pretty much gets its name blackhead because the head of the snake is always really jet black. And here's what happens if you mix blackhead in with the Mochi. Take a look at this. We are going to the dark side, bringing in a lot of beautiful dark into the Mochi. Pretty amazing. So this is the blackhead, Mojave, and Enchi. And if you actually look at the price on this one, the blackhead is a little bit more expensive. So you're actually looking at about $650 for this combination. Makes for a really amazing snake. So here is the spider. As a matter of fact, you know, a lot of people kind of dog on the spider because of the head wobble. Sometimes they can have a head wobble. I'd say in most cases, there's very little to almost no neurological issues with spiders. Sometimes they can have a really bad head wobble and it kind of gets a bad rap. But as I was actually doing a video the other day, the 10 most popular ball python morphs, and believe it or not, as far as sheer numbers of all the morphs that have been produced, the spider was actually number 3. It's pretty amazing that even with the neurological issues, people still go crazy over the spider. And it's a really visually impressive morph, the spider ball python. If you actually mix the spider with the Mochi, this is what you get. Take a look at this beauty. This is a really amazing snake. And I think that's one of the bonuses of the spider, because you actually start mixing it in with combos and you make some really stunning combinations. And I kind of want to add one more gene to this mix so you can really see the potential potential of the Spider Mochi with Orange Dream. Take a look at this. This is actually Orange Dream. And Orange Dream is kind of an interesting gene. I'd say it's probably the brightest orange snake that you can get in ball pythons. And there's different lines of Orange Dream. Some of them are really super bright, and sometimes they're really super expensive too, the really bright ones. And sometimes they're not quite as bright and they're a little less expensive. Really depends. The Orange Dream is extremely variable when it comes to the visual appearance. And here's what happens if you mix Orange Dream in with the Spider Mochi. Take a look at this. This is where it really shines. So this is actually the Spider Mochi with the Orange Dream in the mix. So this is Orange Dream, Mojave, Spider, and Enchi. And when it comes to Orange Dreams, especially a really high intense line like this, it's kind of a flip of the coin sometimes. Sometimes you can come over here to Morphmarket and get really bright Orange Dreams for almost nothing if you get lucky and really shop around. And some people know they have, all right, they're like, all right, I have a really super bright Orange Dream and I spent a lot of money and I'm gonna sell it for a lot of money. It's kind of weird how the whole pricing works. If you actually look at the price on this one, $650. This is a really impressive snake. So take a look at this one. This is actually the Super Orange Dream with the Enchi and the Mojave. So we're actually stripping away the Spider and adding 2 layers of the Orange Dream. The Orange Dream is actually co-dominant, so you can have a super form. And the Super Orange Dream can be super bright orange just as a standalone morph. And you add it into the Mochi, and look at this crazy snake. You get one of the most amazing combinations that I've actually seen. As a matter of fact, Super Orange Dreams are usually super expensive. This one is actually $1,400, sold back in 2017. So this is the last one I want to show you. This is a ghost, and the ghost is just kind of tricky sometimes. You know, sometimes it can actually kind of fade out the snake to where it almost looks like the snake is shedding, but in certain combinations, the ghost can really shine. And here's what happens if you mix ghost into the Mochi. Take a look at this beauty. This is probably one of my favorite ghost combinations. Mixing ghost in with the Enchi and the Mojave makes for a really impressive combination. And ghost is actually a recessive mutation. So if you actually look at some of the genetics on this one, this has the Mojave, the Enchi, and then 2 copies of the ghost. So a lot of people actually consider this a 4-gene animal, which is kind of hard to hit unless you're actually starting with visual ghosts. So actually, if you started with a visual Mojave ghost and a visual Enchi ghost, it'd be pretty easy. But if you actually had like the hets, or if you breed like kind of the hard part about a recessive is that if you actually have a Mochi and you breed it to a ghost, you actually won't get the ghost Mochi. You'll actually get the Mochi with het ghost, just 1 copy of the ghost. It'll look just like a Mochi, and you'll actually have to breed the hets back together to actually get the visual. And kind of the other tricky thing about this whole project is the Mojave is also in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So if you actually had 2 Mochis and you bred them together, potentially you could get the all-white snake with blue eyes, which would be the Super Mojave that masks all the other genes. So if you actually bred this with like a banana or well, it's actually a bamboo, not a banana. It would be a bamboo, the Russo, the lesser, the Mojave, or you know, you could actually breed this to like some of the phantom stuff, and you'd actually get pseudo blue-eyed leucistics, which would be like purple passions and stuff like that. So you'd have to really be careful breeding the Mochi to other genes in the blue-eyed leucistic, because you either end up with an all-white snake or some of the purple passions or stuff like that, where it'll actually mask most of the genes in most of the cases. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Jerry Brown asks, what is the recommended weight for a ball python if you're not going to breed it? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, when it comes to ball pythons, a lot of times you really can't control the weight of a ball python. Really, the only thing you can do is offer food every single week. And a lot of times ball pythons will stop eating for weeks, sometimes months at a time. I've had a lot of ball pythons going off food for 2 or 3 months. It is pretty incredible. And really, the only thing you can do is just keep offering food week after week. and they lose weight at an incredibly slow rate, and they gain weight at a really fast rate. It's pretty amazing. So probably the biggest problem with ball pythons is, especially an adult like Bobby here. Bobby is a full-size ball python. He's a male. He's about 7 years old, maybe almost 8 years old now. And probably one of the biggest problems is if you actually keep feeding a snake like this, pretty decent sized rodents, week after week, and they keep eating every week, sometimes a snake like this can actually get obese. And a lot of times you can actually skip a week. Sometimes you can skip 2 weeks and actually feed them once every 3 weeks. It's pretty amazing with ball pythons to kind of get them back into like a smaller, like a better body condition. But I'd say in most cases, it's not really like if you had a corn snake or like a king snake or something like that, a snake like a reticulated python, those snakes will eat every single time, and as much as you feed them. You can actually take a reticulated python and feed them like 7 or 8 rats all in a row, and they'll eat them just back to back until they look like a balloon. And it is not the case with ball pythons. I'd say in most cases you're lucky if a ball python will eat 1 or 2 rodents back to back. As a matter of fact, if you actually feed a ball python 3 rodents back to back, you have a high probability of them actually regurgitating. So you definitely don't want to overfeed them that much. And a lot of times most people, they're always struggling to feed their ball python. So when it comes to an average weight, I would say as long as they're not looking really fat and plump, you're in good shape as far as your ball python. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.